How did David treat Barzillai upon his return to being king? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Samuel on walking through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 2 Samuel chapter 19, verses 31 to 39. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Samuel chapter 19, verse 31. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Samuel chapter 19, beginning of verse 31. And Barzillai the Gileadite came down from Rogelim and went across the Jordan with the king to escort him across the Jordan. Now Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old, and he had provided the king with supplies while he stayed in Mahanaim, for he was a very rich man. And the king said to Barzillai, "Come across with me, and I will provide for you while you are with me in Jerusalem." But Barzillai said to the king, "How long have I to live, that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? I am today 80 years old. Can I discern between the good and bad? Can your servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any longer the voice of singing men and singing women? Why then should your servant be further burdened to my lord the king? Your servant will go a little way across the Jordan with the king. And why should the king repay me with such a reward? Please let your servant turn back, that I may die in my own city, near the grave of my father and mother. But here is your servant Chimham. Let him cross over with my lord the king, and do for him what seems good to you." And the king answered, "Chimham shall cross over with me, and I will do for him what seems good to you. Now whatever you request of me, I will do for you." Then all the people went over the Jordan, and when the king had crossed over, the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his own place. David is in the process of returning from exile after being overthrown by his son Absalom. He has met with Shimei, whom he appeared to forgive of cursing him on his way out of Jerusalem. Out of chronological order, he has also spoken with Mephibosheth, who told him that Ziba had slandered him and that he remained loyal to David. In this regard, David restored some of Mephibosheth's land to him, but not all of it, due to Ziba helping David on his escape. This was not fair treatment of Mephibosheth, but it is what David did, to which Mephibosheth exclaimed that Ziba could have all the land, for what was important was that David had returned in peace. Coming to verse 31, we have David's last recorded encounter as he crossed over the Jordan, with a man named Barzillai. We met this man back in chapter 17 as one of the men who helped supply David in Mahanaim for his counteroffensive against Absalom. For this kindness, David wanted to repay Barzillai by having him come and live with him in Jerusalem. This does show David's attitude of rewarding loyalty during his exile, like he did with Ziba. However, unlike with Ziba, who greedily slandered another man while showing kindness to David, Barzillai was a kind man who had shown loyalty to the king while expecting nothing in return. Barzillai was wealthy, and so he could afford this kindness. But from what we read of here, even if Barzillai wasn't wealthy, I believe he would have helped David in whatever way he could have. Barzillai, though, was 80 years old, and thus was getting frail. He said that he could no longer discern between good and bad, which is not morally good and morally bad, but good and bad as it concerns the enjoyments of life. We know this by what comes next. He can't discern between good and bad tastes in food or drink because his sense of taste has changed. He cannot discern between good and bad music because his hearing is failing. He thus thought that in his sick state, he would only be a burden to the king and would require the king to care for him. And that is something that Barzillai simply would not do to the king. And so he requested that he be allowed to return to his own city so that he would be able to die there and be buried in the grave of his family. Barzillai wouldn't abandon David, for he would cross over a little ways with him. But he prayed that David would understand and let him return, for the king did have the power to insist. And David did understand and granted Barzillai his request. However, if David did want to repay Barzillai for his kindness, he would take Chimham with him and do to him what seemed good to David. Chimham is called David's servant, but it is largely accepted that this was Barzillai's son due to what we find in 1 Kings, and that he is referred to as a servant because every citizen in Israel would be regarded as David's servant because every citizen would be subject to the king. And so David took Chimham with him, and when we get to our study of Jeremiah, we're going to find the household of Chimham living near Bethlehem. This, of course, couldn't be this Chimham, but it could possibly be some of his descendants due to the proximity of this household to David's ancestral home in Bethlehem. If this is the case, and this is the same Chimham, it showed that this kindness towards Barzillai wasn't just present during the days of David and Solomon, but continued all the way down to the captivity of Judah, some 400 years later. With David's crossing over the Jordan now complete, we'll conclude this chapter, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Samuel chapter 19, verses 40 to 43, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.